Welcome back to the Leadership Growth Blueprint podcast. Today I'm joined by Priddy, CEO of Artisol Performance, keynote speaker, and author of Leading Beyond Fear. Neil works with senior executives and culture architects around the world to build high-performance learning cultures rooted in psychological safety, trust, and accountability. His work has impacted over 90,000 leaders globally, partnering with organizations like PepsiCo, Cisco, and Boehringer Ingelheim to help teams perform at their best, especially in the moments of pressure and uncertainty. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Jordan. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Pleasure is all mine, my friend. Now, Neil, how would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about you and the company for the first time?
Yeah, so it varies from consulting, diagnostic work, that sort of core consulting kind of activities, all the way to training and development, coaching, and thought leadership. We've also been a partner of the Fearless organization for many, many years and developed and delivered training for practitioners. So a lot of our work has really bridged that gap between consulting and training and culture development, and actually training practitioners to go do the same in organizations around the world. So to some degree, we've trained our competitors, but in another way, that has helped to sharpen our work and sharpen our practice and broaden the spectrum that we can come from, because we're not just consulting on our projects. We're often the ones consulting the consultants on complex work around the world. And I've worked digitally, of course, on 6 continents in a single day on several occasions. And then, we often find ourselves consulting people in South America, Japan, Southeast Asia, and we travel to a lot of these places to do work as well. So our work takes us internationally in a couple of different ways, both physically, digitally, and then through the work of others as well. So it's quite extensive, which I like.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're a bit busy with everything.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to dive into the frameworks and the methods. But before we do, Neil, what inspired you to what led you to get into this field? Like, were you always fascinated with, personal development, maxing out your fullest potential? Or I guess what happened?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to think about it is that I had an entirely different career trajectory and world, and that came to an end. And I hadn't recognized my leadership practice as a leadership practice. I hadn't recognized my skills and talents as skills and talents. It's one of those things where to what you is ordinary, to others is extraordinary.
Mm.
And I had some people sort of point out to me, you've been leading for, at that time, sort of almost 20 years. Now it's almost 30 years. And this in the corporate world is probably an area or a domain where I would be successful in helping people change the culture of organizations. So I had that sort of cheerleading going on to some degree. And then I started, okay, what's the easiest first step? Why don't I get a coaching certificate and start interacting with people in that way? And then, okay, well, I have competency in that. I have capacity in that, but I want something more complex. Okay, so I'm going to work with leaders, leader development. I worked with high performance toxic leaders for many years. That was sort of my bread and butter for a little while there. And then that evolved into teamwork, organizational work, and then it just kept growing in scale and complexity. And it still is doing that today, where my niche is not niche at all. It's working with large global organizations all the way down to local firms. So it's really, now it spans the breadth from individual to large complex systems and engaging in work at that level. So it's really a career that's grown. That's the sort of professional side. The personal side is, I remember being a leader who was, outgunned, outmatched, who didn't have what it took at times and was struggling at times. And I was put into a lot of leadership positions too young and too inexperienced with not enough mentorship. It would have been a lot easier if I had some kind of guidance that I didn't have. And you learn a lot from that, and I'm appreciative of those situations, but that leads to sometimes negative behavior, sometimes controlling behavior, sometimes behavior that you go home and you're like, oh, I wish I had not said or done that, because that was crappy for that person and it was crappy for me too. So there's sort of a pain and an angst that can often come with leadership that motivated me to help people find better ways to lead and be effective. And I really do believe that you can have a high performing team that's extremely productive, and that's actually one of the most empowering and enabling and enriching environments, rather than an environment where that isn't balanced with humanity and it takes away from people. Like, you can get those outcomes without it costing people their sort of sense of humanity and agency. And so that's the sort of personal side of what motivates me to do what I do, is that core belief, and that it's not just possible, but also something that other people would want.
Absolutely. Out of curiosity, you said you were in a career or you were going down a
Yeah.
path and then it stopped.
Mhm.
I guess out of curiosity, what happened or what was that?
So I had been in the live production industry. I'd been a race coach. I'd owned several businesses in cabinetry, fine woodworking, those kinds of things. But I was mainly I was a tree climber and an arborist. So I worked in the forestry industry as a faller, and so I had a very physically demanding job that was complex. It's much more complex than a lot of people think. But more than anything, I was an adrenaline junkie, like rock climbing, mountaineering. Like I pushed my body in physical domains the way I push my body in sort of mental domains
Sure.
now, cognitive domains now. And so, yeah, that was my career at that time. And then I just got to the point where my body couldn't take the punishment anymore. Shoulders broke down, knees broke down, hips, back, like it's pretty physically demanding. It was putting the output of an Olympic athlete, you know, on a daily basis for 10 years. So it
No,
was
for
enough.
sure. Did you play sports growing up at all?
I'm
Skiing. Gotcha.
still a very avid skier and mountain biker. So extreme sports, rock climbing, like ski mountaineering is premiering at the Winter Olympics in Italy this year, and I've competed in that and competed in triathlons and stuff like that too. So.
I go down this route to give you context because you said you were doing something for a long period of time and then you stopped, right? And you also said you're an adrenaline junkie. I played elite level baseball my entire life, hence there's many transferable skills from sports and leadership that carry over into today's world and especially in business.
Mhm.
And for a long time, well, personally, for a long time for me, it took a while to figure out what I wanted to do. Where I had passion, where I saw myself growing, that I can see myself doing for a long period of time, but still maintaining that high performing culture, right? And business is like that, 100%. You are running a marathon. Let me reframe that. You are sprinting a marathon, in my opinion. That is my opinion. But anyways, on that note, you have a book coming up, correct?
Yep, I sure do.
Please give us some frameworks or some methodologies from that book, just one that you would love to share with the audience.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting about the book is when we started, so Leading Beyond Fear was written as a field guide. And the reason why was because, when I started in my first leadership position in Army Cadets at 13, I had pretty crappy mentorship and I wish I had something better to look to. But when we started this journey in becoming experts in psychological safety and really using that as a launch pad for all of our culture development, you know, there was no field guide. There was a lot of theory, a lot of academia, but there was no like, what are the skills? What are the frameworks? What are the tools? What kind of mindset? What kind of understanding do I need to have of the world around me and how people work so that I can broadly apply some of the frameworks that we have? So the book has different frameworks on things like negotiation, but also things like how to frame work effectively and how to even design better meetings.
Hmm.
So there's a variety of different frameworks, but I think one of the most that I don't name specifically in the book, in part because it hit the cutting room floor, was like, okay, the book has all the pieces, and this is sort of the meta framework, which is called sense making. So what the book does is gives you all the parts and pieces to do this. And what I get to share now is like, this is the meta skill that you really need. And I'll probably end up writing a book about this that includes this because there wasn't enough pages. But sense making starts off with emotional regulation. Then you move through a process of discernment. And discernment is a little bit different than prioritization. Prioritization orders things where discernment values things. So just what has the most high value. And then that allows you to frame and reframe problems so that you can come up with better solutions and move into a place of high quality inquiry where you can gather perspectives. So you might be thinking, like, what the hell is this? Why is this important? And the reality is that all of what we deal with in business now is complex. It is not complicated. It's complex. When most of us go through school, the way school organizes our thinking is towards critical thinking, which is helpful and necessary. But what it doesn't do is provide a framework of healthy skepticism, which is an understanding that you can never completely know any answer 100%. That's the foundational baseline of skepticism. So to complete your understanding of complex problems, you must gather perspectives. People need to understand what's valuable, what's most important. They need to have good framing. They need to have this sort of setup. So simply called that sort of setting the stage. And then this is from Dr. Amy Edmondson's work, setting the stage, inviting participation, and responding productively. Emotional regulation allows you to do all these kinds of things. So this is sort of a meta skill and then the skills within it. So that's the framework to start off with. Emotional regulation, discernment, framing and reframing, inquiry, perspective. And then you can start getting into more strategic prioritization. What are the 1 to 3 issues that really matter? How are we going to design experimentation? And this is where you start getting into sort of decision architecture. How are we going to make a decision? What's the decision what would we see as an effective decision? And then how do we design experimentation? Right. So that's sort of the application of systems thinking within that. So it's kind of a complex thing, but you need something complex, and all of us have varying degrees of competency within that flow from emotional regulation to design experimentation. And where this is applicable is in every day. If you're in a one-on-one meeting and you need to get somebody to do something different than what they are already doing, you need to be able to stay calm in the conversation. You need to be able to frame and reframe the problem. You need to be able to discern what's important and what's not. You need to help them prioritize, and then you need to make decisions together and design how you're going to experiment and move forward. You use that in a one-on-one, you use that in a group setting, you're going to use this all over in various conversations with people, and it takes you from complex unknown into clear action and processes that accommodate for the fact that you can't know everything all the time. So that's why I like that sort of flow and that process of execution, and that sense-making capacity is a meta skill that I think leaders really need to engage in. And the book helps people develop those skills.
Perfect. Thank you so much for those insights. I can definitely ramble on about all the different, I guess, meta skills within the whole process and the whole system. But emotional regulation is something that I want to touch on, maybe because I possibly struggle with that. But I feel like that is such a vital skill when you are a leader and someone in a leadership position, because if you are quick-tempered, if you are stressed easily, your emotions will repel or reflect back onto the company or the team that you're leading. So how do you encourage or recommend or, I guess, change someone's emotional regulation patterns? Do you have any tips, tricks, pointers that you would love to share?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. There's first one that I start off with is how you organize your day helps regulate how you show up. So we were in a training recently where there was high-level executives with 40, 30-minute meetings in a week. And that is absolutely obscene to think that you could switch contexts 40 times in a week and still be productive, still be effective, still make good decisions. It's simply not possible. There is no way that leader is effective, if that's even the truth. But what I do know is that if you're asking your brain to switch context that much, that rapidly, half an hour every half hour for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, you can't be regulated. You can't be, and even if you can't be attuned to the emotional data that is coming from the other people you're communicating with. So That is really, really critical, is to set up your day in such a way that you have reasonable breaks for your brain, that your context switching is minimized, that you have breaks for meaningful deep work. So 3 hours of chunks of time. So there's a structural component that allows people to keep more emotionally regulated. And then I like to, another one that I think is really, really important is to be constantly in what I call an update mindset. So this old saying that's been around forever is leaders are learners.
Mm.
That's great. But what a lot of people misconstrue that as is leaders read books. Please read my book. I would love you to read my book. But what that really means is leaders, the further you go up in leadership, the more you move away from dictating what's happening or going to happen or needs to happen and towards inquiry. The more senior you are, the more inquiry based your day to day leadership needs to be because the less people tell you. So you need to elicit more. So you need to have an update mindset. And what that does is allow you to be curious. And a curious mind is a neutral mind. So if you're in that constant update, curious state, it's a lot easier to regulate your vagal nerve, regulate what's going on in your brain and your body, regulate your brain chemistry. That state is a state of much more neutrality. And, it takes a little bit of courage to get there, frankly. But that's the habit, I think, is the habit, is update mindset.
Absolutely. No, great insights there because when you are a C-level exec, no employee or no sure employee is going to be completely honest with you. They're always going to, how can I say this? Frame it in a way where it protects their position within the company.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people call it whitewashing. We call it self-editing. There's a lot of self-editing goes on. And the thing that a lot of executives don't understand is that there is such a strong push factor for people to do that they don't have to do hardly anything wrong for people to be even more silent. I often say silence is the default. Speaking up candidly is not the default. So if you want people to speak up candidly, you have to actively create the conditions consistently again and again and again and again and again to prove to people that how they're going to be received in the future is good, is going to be well received. So being emotionally regulated is massively important for that. And that doesn't mean having no emotions. That means having a clear sense of your own emotions and understanding how those are being navigated. So I often say emotions are data. So if you can see your emotions as information, then you can leverage them. I have a really good friend of mine who's extremely intuitive, so intuitive that people don't understand what he's saying, where he's like, I feel like this is wrong. That's so often how he frames it. There's something doesn't feel right here. And his challenge is getting people to understand that his intuition is a data point. And what it can be used for is designing experimentation. Okay, this is my intuition. How can we test and learn and see if that's right or not? How can we validate that intuition? But if that emotional sort of competency wasn't allowed into the conversation, you wouldn't be designing experimentations to validate it. And then you wouldn't be learning as a team. And that, so all these cascading positives are then lost. So the emotional regulation thing from a leadership perspective is very important. And it's essential, especially with AI and all these things coming around. Like people are going to have to get used to acting on data that is incomplete.
No, 100%. And you framed that exceptionally well. Thank you for that. In regards to, I guess, like client case studies or specific examples where you did work with an organization, you implemented your process and they had an exceptional result as the outcome. Does anyone come to mind for you specifically?
There's several. I can't name a name, but a large Silicon Valley organization that I'm thinking of right now, one that's actually come to mind recently because we've had several people ask us about how we did it. But it was a large tech firm. They went, at the beginning of COVID, they went from 5,400 people to 9,000 in about 18 months. They grew massively. And they wanted to grow their culture. And the way we did that was by implementing a system where things like psychological safety were measured not as a performance metric, but as a team health metric. And then there was a response mechanism built in. So scores were below a certain point. So people would get the survey about once every 4 to 6 months on a regular cadence, and everybody got it. And as soon as there were scores below certain, HR business partners or their direct leader would reach out to the team leader and say, hey, notice the score was down. wanted to check in. And that would start a conversation. Do they need coaching? Do they need support? Has something changed? Put eyes and ears on teams that were showing early indications of things not going well or as well as they could be going.
Hmm.
And then, there was sort of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 responses. But what that did was gave leaders access to support before teams went off the rails. And that improved engagement scores, that reduced they were hiring like crazy, but the turnover scores that they had been seeing of tenured employees was very high. So we saw that reduce. We saw several indicators like that, and the cost of the program was six figures, small, low six figures, but the return on investment, we're talking 7-8 figures return on investment within the first year. So the ROI of that kind of a program was very, very significant.
Absolutely. Maybe 10x or I guess 100x if it's 8.
It was, yeah, it was more like a X. I mean, of directly attributable ROI, we were looking at about 50x. And then of other elements where we're like, we're pretty sure that this had an impact, where we're getting closer to 100x.
That's amazing. No, congrats on the success. And in regards of, I guess, in regarding success, how do most of your clients find you today, or how do you, work with clients in today's world?
Mostly referrals. We have some connections with people at Harvard University. We've got connections with people at Stanford. We've got connections with people sort of around. So there's some academics that will send people in our direction if it's the right fit. And then we had a client come to us recently. A lady said, I've been following your newsletter for years, and I now have a chance to work with you. Like, now it's the right time. So a lot of that kind of people reaching out directly to us. So that's how we get most of our work, ongoing work with large clients. When you have large client systems, there's sort of various verticals or new businesses that are being purchased where you want to work with the new company that's been acquired, helping to integrate them, those kinds of things. We do a lot of that kind of work as well. So we do a little bit of marketing outreach, but like very little. It's more like to make sure that we're keeping our, still a business. You got to have people coming in.
Let the world know that we're still here,
Yeah, that's right.
Are you reading any books right now?
I'll tell you, no.
That's funny.
I mean, I am. I'm reading The Pillars of the Earth. But the reason why I laugh is because I typically, and for many years, was sort of like, I would read 3 to 5 books at a time.
Hmm.
And in my first few years of business, in corporate business, I should say, I read about 200 books. Just like I need my own version of a PhD, so to speak. And now I fall asleep within about a half a sentence.
Got you.
So I would read more, but I fall asleep real fast.
Makes total sense. I mean, if you're reading that many, that amount of books, you probably you put your dues in, one might say.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And then Neil, let's see, where can the people find you if they wanted to explore your work further?
The best place is LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and then through the website aristotelperformance.com. We have our blog there that we've got 20,000 followers, something like that on there now. Pretty good following. So it's those are the two easiest places to find a guy like me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in. And can they find the book on the website?
Absolutely, they sure can. Or they can go to Amazon, Indigo, Amazon, Wiley, the publisher, Wiley. You can go directly to their website as well. Just search Leading Beyond Fear and you'll find it.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining the show. Audience, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Thanks a lot.